All right, welcome to your deep dive. You know, the one we crafted just for you. We're diving into becoming the Iceman, pushing past perceived limits.
That's the one co-written by Wim Hof, right? And Justin Rosales.
Yep. And we're doing this because you're interested in cold exposure training and what it can do.
Yeah, seems like there's more to it than just, taking a cold shower.
Exactly. The book really goes deep, not just into techniques, but into Wim's whole philosophy, too. So we'll be pulling out the most fascinating parts, the stuff that'll really stick with you. Don't worry, we're not just going to focus on those crazy feats he's known for.
Like climbing Everest in shorts, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one, but we'll definitely cover those too. But we'll also bring it down to earth, look at the stuff you can actually use in your everyday life.
That's where it gets really interesting, I think, the practical applications.
Definitely. Okay, so Wim Hof. He's had this unusual fascination with the cold since he was a kid. There's this story about him as a canyoning instructor in the Spanish Pyrenees, climbing a frozen waterfall. I mean, wow, that sounds like a pretty life-changing experience.
Absolutely. Can you imagine surrounded by ice, feeling that primal fear, but pushing past it? For Wim, that was like a turning point, solidifying his belief in trusting your instincts, overcoming fear. It's like he found this hidden strength within himself, a resilience that he could tap into through his mind. And it pushed him to keep searching for knowledge,
Yeah.
exploring psychology, philosophy, all these different areas that shaped his perspective.
Yeah, you can see this thread of self-discovery running throughout his life, like that moment when he walked barefoot in the snow as a young man. What did he mean by expanding consciousness? That comes up a lot in the book.
It's about breaking free from limitations, the ones we put on ourselves, tapping into a deeper awareness of ourselves and the world around us. He believes that by pushing our physical limits, especially through cold exposure, we can reach this heightened state of consciousness, find a deeper sense of peace, purpose. That walk in the snow, it was symbolic for him, showing his growing control over his body's response to the cold, like expanding his perception of what's possible.
So it's not just about toughening up physically, it's more profound than that, a mental and spiritual transformation.
Exactly.
But how did he go from a curious young guy walking in the snow to the Iceman? There's this incredible story, a rescue, that really put him on the map.
Oh, yes, the man who fell through the ice. That's almost like a scene from a movie, right? Diving in without a second thought, it was pure instinct and compassion. And of course, showing off his incredible cold tolerance and swimming skills. That's what grabbed the media's attention, launched him into the spotlight.
I can picture the news crews just amazed by his ability to handle that freezing water. But it wasn't just the physical stuff, was it? It was what he was saying about the potential of cold exposure. Did his early theories actually hold up scientifically?
Well, back then, people thought he was pretty out there. Claiming you could actually train yourself to influence how your body reacts to cold, that was unheard of. But there is a basic understanding of how cold exposure affects the body. Your blood vessels constrict to conserve heat, prioritize your core temperature. Wim was suggesting you could, learn to control those mechanisms.
So not just tolerating the cold, but actively influencing your body's response. That's where things start to get really interesting. And this is also where Justin Rosales comes in. He was fascinated by this Tibetan technique called tumo, right, or inner fire. He even went to a workshop in California to learn more. Can you explain tumo for those of us who are clueless?
So tumo, it's essentially a yogic practice involving these special breathing techniques and visualization to generate inner heat. Tibetan monks, living in those frigid environments, have practiced it for centuries. It's a cool example of how the mind can influence the body's temperature regulation. Justin, he was drawn to this idea of generating inner heat. It kind of lined up with what Wim was saying. So he sought out this workshop to experience it firsthand. But he went in with a scientific mind, trying to connect the practice to both Buddhist beliefs and practical applications.
So we've got Wim with his experiences and theories, and then Justin intrigued by this ancient technique. It seems like both of their paths are leading towards this idea of pushing past limitations, both physical and mental.
You got it. And the fascinating thing is they're coming at it from different angles. Wim with his more intuitive experiential approach, and Justin with his scientific curiosity, wanting to understand the hows and whys.
And to be clear, we're talking about the Wim Hof who ran a half marathon barefoot in Lapland. He wasn't just talking about cold exposure, he was putting it into action in pretty extreme ways.
Oh, absolutely. That half marathon, that was just the tip of the iceberg. Climbing Mount Everest in shorts, setting world records for swimming under ice. These were statements for Wim. Proof that the mind can push the boundaries of what we think is humanly possible. But the best part is, He didn't just rely on anecdotes. He actually volunteered for scientific research to back up his methods.
Speaking of pushing limits, that research is where it starts to get really convincing. Didn't he do some experiments at Radboud University Hospital that must have been a turning point in how the scientific community saw him?
Absolutely groundbreaking. Those studies at Radboud, they provided the evidence. They showed that Wim could actually consciously influence his autonomic nervous system and his immune response, stuff that scientists thought was impossible. There was one experiment where they injected him with endotoxin, which usually triggers a huge immune response, but he managed to suppress the symptoms using his breathing techniques. This challenged the whole idea that these systems were totally out of our control.
So, we've got Wim's incredible feats, Justin's fascination with Tumo, and now scientific proof that seems to back up Wim's claims. It's all painting a picture of a method that goes way beyond just tolerating the cold. It's like unlocking the potential of the mind-body connection. But before we jump into the specifics of the Wim Hof method, let's talk about Justin's trip to Poland.
He goes to one of Wim's workshops, right? I'm dying to know what that was like. Did he find the answers he was looking for? That trip to Poland was a huge moment for Justin. A pilgrimage to learn from the guy who had become his inspiration. And it wasn't easy getting there either. Remember that volcanic eruption in Iceland? Grounded flights all over Europe. Justin was determined to make it to that workshop, and he did. He didn't let anything stop him.
Okay, so the stage is set. We're building up to this workshop in Poland. What was the setting like? Was it some kind of secluded mountain retreat, a high-tech training facility?
Not quite. It all went down at this cozy house called Time Out in a small Polish town. Super low-key setting for what they were about to experience. It was more about getting away from distractions and focusing inward.
That's interesting. All right, let's hear about the training. What did they actually do?
Lots of cold water immersion, of course.
Yeah.
Swimming in rivers, standing under waterfalls, practicing breathing exercises in the snow, all pushing their limits. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's important to understand the core principles behind the Wim Hof method. Then you'll really get what Justin went through.
Perfect. Let's break down those principles, then we can dive into the details of the training in Poland. You've got me hooked, ready to go deeper into this world of cold exposure and the incredible potential it seems to hold. So we left off with Justin arriving in Poland, excited to learn from Wim himself. But before we get to the training, can you break down the core principles of the Wim Hof method? What's Wim trying to achieve here?
Well, it's like a three-pronged approach,
Yeah.
Breath work, cold exposure, and commitment. And those elements work together, kind of help you tap into what your body can really do.
Okay, let's unpack that. Breath work. Isn't that just like breathing, something we already do?
Right. But the Wim Hof method, it uses specific techniques to consciously influence your physiology, you could say. It's like power breathing, maybe, rounds of deep inhalations and exhalations, and then you hold your breath. This whole process, it increases oxygen levels in your blood, makes your body more alkaline, activates your sympathetic nervous system.
So there's an actual technique. It's not just taking deep breaths.
Exactly. And this controlled hyperventilation, it can have some interesting effects. Tingling, lightheadedness, some people even feel euphoric. But the main thing is, it gets you ready for the cold exposure.
Makes sense. Like priming your system to handle the stress of the cold better. But where does the cold exposure actually fit in? It seems intense to just jump into an ice bath,
Well, the cold, it's a powerful tool, for building resilience, both physically and mentally. When you expose yourself to those cold temperatures, it sets off all these responses in your body. Blood vessels constrict, heart rate goes up, your body's working hard to stay warm.
So it's a form of stress that forces your body to adapt.
Yeah, you could say that. And the Wim Hof method, it's all about adapting gradually. You start slow, short exposures, then you increase the duration and intensity over time. Remember how Justin started with those cold showers and barefoot runs? Early steps in building up that cold tolerance.
So it's not about being tough and diving into freezing water right away. It's about respecting your limits and pushing them bit by bit.
Exactly. And this is where the science gets really interesting. Cold exposure, they think it activates brown fat, the kind that burns calories to generate heat. And it releases endorphins, those feel-good chemicals that can boost your mood and even reduce pain.
So there are actual benefits to embracing the cold, huh?
Yeah, more and more evidence is showing that. Regular cold exposure, it could be good for your heart, your immune system, even your mental well-being.
Okay, so we've got breath work, cold exposure. You mentioned commitment as the third piece. How does that fit in?
Commitment's like the foundation. It's what holds it all together. It's about showing up, even when it's tough, and making cold exposure part of your life. Remember, Wim's philosophy, it's bigger than just physical achievements. It's about building that mental strength, resilience that you can apply to anything.
So it's about discipline, self-awareness, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's what makes Justin's journey in Poland so powerful. He wasn't just learning techniques, he was going through a real transformation. The workshop forced him to face his fears, overcome that resistance in his mind, and find a strength he didn't even know he had.
Okay, I'm ready for the training details. What kind of challenges did Justin face in Poland? The book mentions swimming in rivers, standing under waterfalls. Sounds intense.
Intense is right. It was designed to push them, both mentally and physically. They started with the breathing exercises, learning to control their breath, using the techniques Wim had developed.
So they put those breathwork principles into practice right away.
Yep, right from the start. And that controlled breathing, it helped prepare them for the cold exposure challenges. Like they do these breathing techniques while submerged in icy water, focusing on staying calm and in control, even though it was uncomfortable.
Wait, hold on. Breathing exercises while submerged? That sounds incredibly difficult.
Oh, it was, but that's the point, right? By combining the breathwork and the cold, they were training their bodies and minds to handle stress, discomfort. And it wasn't just about toughing it out physically. Wim, he stressed how important the mental side was. The focus, the visualization, using your mind to override your body's natural aversion to the cold.
So there's a mental aspect, not just gritting your teeth and bearing it.
For sure. Wim believes that the mind plays a huge role in how we experience the cold. By focusing your attention, controlling your breath, and visualizing warmth, you can actually change your body's response.
Now that's fascinating, like you're mentally mastering those physical sensations.
That's what Justin was discovering. He talks about these moments of intense pain, feeling like needles stabbing his skin as he stood under that freezing waterfall. But he didn't quit. He used the breath work, the visualizations, and his willpower to push through it.
That takes serious mental strength. Not everyone could handle that and keep going.
It really shows the power of the mind. That resilience we can tap into when we push past our limits. That's what Wim's trying to teach, that we all have this inner strength. And cold exposure is just a way to access it.
Okay, so we got swimming in icy water, breathing in the snow. Did they practice Tumo, that Tibetan technique Justin was interested in?
Well, they didn't do Tumo as a separate practice, but the principles, generating inner heat through breathwork and visualization, those were woven into the Wim Hof method. So Justin was experiencing those concepts, but in a more practical, integrated way.
I see. So Wim took this ancient wisdom and made it part of a modern, accessible method. But it wasn't just ice baths and breathing exercises, right? The book mentions hiking, rappelling, even playing soccer in the park.
You're right. Wim's all about a holistic approach. They did all these physical activities, but with that cold exposure element, pushing their limits in different ways, showing that what they were learning applied to any challenge.
So it's not just becoming an Iceman. It's about building resilience and adaptability that you can use in your everyday life.
Exactly. And that's what's so inspiring about Justin's transformation. He started out hesitant, unsure of himself, but by the end of that workshop, he had embraced the cold, faced those fears head on, and came out with this newfound confidence, this deeper understanding of what he was capable of.
It sounds like a profound personal journey, not just learning some techniques.
Transformative is a word. And the best part is, it doesn't end there. It's like, what happens after the workshop, right? Does Justin just go back to his normal life and forget it all? No way.
That's what I want to know. How do you take these intense experiences and apply them to your everyday life? Did he actually keep it up? What were the benefits?
And that's exactly what we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive. Justin's journey back home, the challenges he faced, and what happened when he incorporated the Wim Hof method into his life for the long haul.
All right, so we left Justin fresh from Poland, ready to bring the Wim Hof method back to his everyday life. That jump from intense training to daily routine, that's what I'm most curious about. Did he, build an ice chamber in his basement or something?
Not quite. The book makes it clear that it's more about consistency and finding what works for you, not necessarily recreating the workshop exactly.
So baby steps then. You don't go from those ice plunges in Poland to jumping into a frozen lake back home.
Right. Justin starts with those small, manageable things. Like he starts taking cold showers every day, just short bursts at first, and gradually making them longer. It's a practical way to get your body used to the cold, without going overboard.
That makes sense, like building up your tolerance slowly instead of shocking your system. But I'm sure there were some bumps along the way. Did he have any setbacks? Moments where he thought, maybe this Iceman thing isn't for me?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's this funny story where he tries to go for a barefoot run in the snow, but instead of proper shoes, he wears socks and sandals.
Socks and sandals for a barefoot run in the snow? bold choice.
It was. And of course, it backfires. He ends up with numb feet at a Burger King, realizing maybe he wasn't as ready as he thought.
That's both hilarious and relatable. I think we've all been there, where our enthusiasm gets ahead of our preparation. But I like that he shares those setbacks. It makes his journey feel more real, something we could actually do too.
Exactly. It shows that you got to listen to your body, respect your limits, and not get discouraged by setbacks. It's about persistence, even if it means, ending up with frozen feet at Burger King sometimes.
So cold showers, barefoot runs, hopefully with better footwear next time. What else did he incorporate into his life? Did he keep up the breath work?
Oh yeah, that was key. He made it a daily practice, sometimes in the morning, sometimes before bed, just fitting it into his schedule.
I imagine that consistency was important, right, for getting those long-term benefits.
He was. He talks about how the breath work, it wasn't just about handling the cold better. It helped him feel calmer, less stressed, even more focused.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like a form of meditation, but it also preps you for those physical challenges. But realistically, not everyone's got access to frozen waterfalls and icy rivers in their backyard. What about those of us in warmer climates? Did he find ways to create those controlled training environments you were talking about?
He got pretty creative. The book goes into all these ways he experimented with everyday stuff to create cold exposure opportunities, like filling garbage cans with ice water for those extremity immersions or using frozen lasagna pans for foot exposures.
Frozen lasagna pans? That's brilliant. Shows you don't need fancy equipment or, extreme conditions to make it work.
Exactly. He even came up with his own step-by-step method, building on what he learned from Wim and his own experiments, making it something anyone can try.
So we've got the practical techniques, the persistence, but did it actually work? What about the benefits? Did he notice any real changes in his physical or mental well-being?
He did, and some of them were pretty profound. He talks about feeling more energized, less stressed. Even his immune system seemed to get stronger. He rarely gets sick anymore, even when everyone else is coming down with something. And beyond the physical stuff, he describes this mental clarity, a greater awareness of his body and mind.
So it's not just about toughing out the cold. It's about finding this deeper level of vitality and resilience.
Exactly. And it goes back to Wim's philosophy, that cold exposure is a way to unlock our potential, pushing past those limits we set for ourselves, both physical and mental, tapping into this wellspring of strength that's inside all of us.
This deep dive has been fascinating. We went from Wim's incredible story to the science behind it all and witnessed Justin's amazing transformation. It's clear the Wim Hof method is about so much more than just ice baths. It's about resilience, pushing boundaries, and discovering our own potential.
Yeah, and for me, the big takeaway is this: the power of the mind. Whether it's handling extreme cold or facing everyday challenges, this method shows us we're capable of way more than we think.
Couldn't agree more. It reminds us that we have the power to change how our bodies work, to tap into that strength and resilience we might not even realize we have.
And that's what I'd like to leave you with. What limits are you holding on to? What could you achieve if you embrace the cold, both literally and figuratively, and allowed yourself to go beyond those boundaries?
That's a powerful thought, and one that I hope this deep dive has inspired you to explore. Remember, this was just for you. We've given you the knowledge, the inspiration. Now it's up to you to take action.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, you're capable of more than you think.